Hello, welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. I am John Kier, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It's Season 3, Episode 13. It is April 21st. We are less than a week away from the draft. A week away from today is the final day of the draft. So, with it fast approaching, we thought we would take a look at some more prospects that the Pittsburgh Steelers took a look at and had visits with, whether it was at the combine. They had in for private visits, or they went there to their school for a pro day. So we figured we'd cover a little bit of everything here just to make sure we had all of our bases covered. Because in all likelihood, if the Steelers are having someone in, there's a good chance that they're interested in them. And that doesn't always mean that they're going to draft somebody. But, I mean, how likely do you think it is that the Steelers do draft one of these guys, considering the fact that they had 3 players in for visits like these last year that ended up getting drafted, them being James Conner, Joshua Dobbs, and Keon Adams?
Oh, it's a 100% chance, without a doubt. At least one of these guys is going to be taken. There's no way that they would have met with all these guys and ended up not liking any of them. Just the chances are way too low for that. So I'm going with a 100% chance that at least one is taken.
I mean, there's a reason you have those visits, and it's not to say I'm not going to draft any of these guys. So we're proceeding under the assumption that at least one, perhaps more, will be drafted. Before we get into that news, some good news from Pittsburgh. Anthony Chicklow, the linebacker who had been tendered a 6th-round option, has signed his tender after, we did the Edge episode and we were wondering, when is he going to sign his tender? Well, he just did. Good move, Austin, right?
Yeah, it's a great move. Because obviously the linebacker depth for edge and outside linebacker did not look good when we covered it. So at least he had some backup depth and another guy that actually has played in an NFL game, so I'm happy about it.
He's a great special teams player, but how much do you think he could contribute on defense? Do you think, what's a good sack total for him every year? I think 3 is a pretty good amount for him.
Yeah, I was going to say 4. I was just right around there. I was going to say 4, and I think that's good because he usually does get a decent amount of playing time. At least from last season, he had a decent amount in the beginning. So I'm going to go with 4.
He basically unseated Arthur Moats as the next guy in, I think, because the last few years Moats has gotten somewhere between 3 and 5. So that's probably a good number to expect from him, I would imagine. All right, so as we talked about, the whole purpose of this episode is to basically go over other prospects that we either didn't talk about or the Steelers had on their radar that we haven't talked about. So we chose 4 different players from any position that the Pittsburgh Steelers brought in that intrigued us, especially that we wanted to talk about. So I guess I think it's no surprise here, but Austin and I both had inside linebackers. Did you have 1 or 2? Tell me what positions you had.
I apologize. I took my first one was just a linebacker. He could play inside or outside, and his name was Dorian O'Daniel from Clemson. He was 6'1" and 215 pounds. O'Daniel came out of high school as a top outside linebacker recruit in the nation after a fantastic career as both a running back and a linebacker. In 2013, Clemson scooped him up, as a freshman, he started once and led the team with 13 special teams tackles, having 31 total tackles as well as a sack in 12 games. In his next season, he was again a problem on special teams, racking up a team-leading 19 special teams tackles and had 32 tackles in 15 games as a reserve. And then in his junior year is where he got to see a lot more time on defense, getting 10 starts in 15 games, getting 60 tackles, 10 for loss, and 2.5 sacks. Then he really stepped it up his senior season, earning himself second-team all-conference after leading the Tigers with 103 tackles, 11.5 of them going for loss, 5 sacks, and 7 passes defensed in 14 starts. So I think one of the best things about him is he may be the best special teams player in this draft, as he made so many stops on special teams, it's ridiculous. He finished his career with 48 special teams tackles, and most of them are on kick coverage, so he'd definitely make an immediate impact on special teams if a team were to draft him. It's helped that he's been a sound tackler, often looking to see who he's hitting and driving his body into them while wrapping to finish the play. He has also made some pretty nice tackles using his lateral agility to get guys trying to perform cutback runs. Then he offers versatility. As I said, he can play outside linebacker as well as inside linebacker, depending on what a team wants out of him. As for coverage, he has played near the line and match up on slot targets, which is impressive. He has redirected routes with a force and can read and squeeze space well in zone. Finally, he has a good hustle to him to keep contained on the perimeter on perimeter runs. On the flip side of what's not so great about him, like a lot of linebackers we've gone over, it seems, O'Daniel really only has one full season starting, so we don't exactly have a lot of tape on him. Then he really doesn't have the build for his position. He's got the body of a big safety rather than a linebacker. Next, he's really just an average athlete with both below average speed as well as acceleration. Then he also is slow in his directional change, making him not much of a sideline guy when you consider his pursuit speed. Against blockers, he's going to need to prove he can beat them near the line of scrimmage in the NFL, and also he has been blocked far too often by smaller slot players on spread or rushing attacks. In coverage, he gives a little too much separation in man, plays upright, and finally will need to do better at anticipating routes. So, an NFC regional scout has talked about O'Daniel, saying his special teams production really is rare. He might get drafted and make a team just on his special teams ability alone. And honestly, he's probably right. He just knows how to get past kick return blocks and get to the returner. Still, though, he isn't the greatest on defense. He has some athleticism issues that are going to be hard to work with. But still, he could definitely be a quality backup and will likely be drafted in either the 5th or 6th round. So that was Dorian O'Daniel. He's a linebacker out of Clemson. Who is your first prospect?
My first is the safety Marcus Allen from Penn State, and no, he's not related to the former Oakland Raider Marcus Allen, the running back, famously scoring a touchdown in Super Bowl, that was the 1983 season, I know that, but, so 18, Super Bowl 18. In any case, he is the godson, actually, of Hall of Fame running back Curtis Martin, so he does have a little bit of football attached to his name anyways. Speaking of his play, he was a consistent presence on the back end of the defensive backfield for Penn State. He started 46 games over 4 seasons and was a hitting and tackling machine, racking up 320 career tackles with 3 sacks and an interception with 10 total pass breakups. Pros about Allen: he hits hard and his play demands the respect and attention of the offense. He's a willing and strong defender in run support and has great tackling technique. As a former team captain, he was recognized as a great locker room guy and a leader as well. He works hard to not get beaten in deep coverage and matches up well with tight ends in space. The cons for Allen, though: he lacks good instincts and anticipation. He usually waits in coverage to attack the receiver, and he doesn't have good coverage stats at all. He only had 10 pass breakups and 1 interception in 4 years. He's not fast enough to be a free safety either, and he'll overrun tackles right now, creating cutback lanes. So he's probably never going to become a good cover guy. So the bottom line with Marcus Allen: he fits in on a team as a run-supporting, hard-hitting option at the safety linebacker hybrid position. He does have a place in the NFL, but he wasn't great in coverage, and that's going to keep him from being a top-level safety. He's projected to be taken between rounds 3 and 4, so he's likely a second to third day selection. So who's your second prospect, Austin?
My second prospect is Russell Gage Jr. He's a wide receiver from LSU. He's 6 foot and 184 pounds. Gage will be my third offensive player I've looked at from LSU, as well as the second receiver from there. He hasn't had the most production in college, only having 5 catches for 62 yards and a touchdown in 2016, and a slightly expanded role in 2017 with 21 receptions for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns, as well as 28 rushing attempts for 232 yards and a touchdown. But still, not really that much. That's mostly because he got a late start. He was recruited as a defensive back and played as a reserve safety for LSU for 2 seasons before switching to wide receiver in 2016, and now he looks to make it in the NFL. Before I start going into what's good and bad about him, I'm going to be real. There's not really that much to say about him. He just doesn't have a lot of tape on him, and a lot of analysts were even struggling to get some words on him, but I did my best here. So, anyhow, he's shown to be a pretty solid athlete, using his loose hips, light feet, and solid bursts to really try and beat his man. From watching a little tape I found that this dude is relentless and fearless, always trying to hurdle guys that try tackling him too low. And for the most part, it works. He hurdled people in 3 of his games last year. Honestly, though, he could be brought in as a special teams ace to replace Darius Hayward-Bay in an attempt to go younger and cheaper, as he loves and cherishes his role as a special teams ace, playing as both a kick cover specialist as well as a gunner on punt team. It's been pretty good for him. He didn't get to play much, but still got 17 special teams tackles as well as the fumble recovery. Then back to his actual offense, he could be useful on jet sweeps, just like I thought Quadri Henderson could be, as he had more rushing attempts than receptions this year. When he's running routes, he's got good bounce to gain separation when sticking and stemming. And then finally, he shows willingness to lay out after the catch when tracking the deep throw. So to his negatives, Gage is really thin and can get worked by stronger corners, but that's not really the biggest issue with Gage. For him, it's obviously his production with just 26 catches from the past 2 seasons. So that's not really a lot to work with or study the tape effectively. His route running definitely needs to be polished up. It almost looks as he's counting his steps when he runs, and other times he looks like he lacks discipline and will start freestyling his route, making it hard for quarterbacks to hit at the break. Speaking of quarterbacks struggling to hit him, he's going to need to improve his route adjustment to the coverage to open up easier windows for his quarterback. And then finally, he's not always ready for the ball when coming out of his breaks. So, despite not being a high-valued guy in the draft, scouts love him as they can see his love for the game in his tape and how he has put maximum effort into the few snaps he does get to play. Coming from a defensive back background has really helped him on special teams to get the tackles, and I think a lot of the team is interested in going to take him for that and his possible upside to blossom into a decent backup receiver. But still, there's not really much tape showing that Gage will be really good at wide receiver, and thus will probably go in the 7th round, if not undrafted. I am actually sort of leaning towards undrafted for him. So that was Russell Gage, the wide receiver out of LSU. Who is your second prospect?
I'm taking a look at inside linebacker Matthew Thomas from Florida State University, the 6'3", 232-pound redshirt senior. So Thomas, he was actually part of the team that won the 2013 national title game against Auburn. He actually wasn't a big factor, though. He wasn't playing much at that time, but he did become a major contributor in his redshirt junior and senior seasons, 2016 and 2017. He finished with double-digit sacks in those seasons, tackles for loss in those seasons, and he had a combined 3 sacks in those 2 years, 4 pass breakups, an interception, and a fumble recovery. He finished his career with 191 tackles and 25.5 for a loss. The pros about Thomas: he's athletic, explosive, and has a good frame on his body. He's got good closing bursts, and he's fast enough to make up for diagnosing a play slowly. He's a big hitter, too, and he can play in man coverage when he's asked to. He's fast and explosive enough to make stops in the backfield on some plays. The cons, though: he didn't have a lot of flashy plays in college. He forced and recovered just 1 fumble in his entire college career. He doesn't commit to the run as often as he should. Sometimes he'll wait for the action to get to him rather than trying to dictate the terms. He doesn't always have great technique, and he'll quit on his fundamentals at times. Instincts and awareness just simply aren't there right now, and he looks lost against play action. So the bottom line for Thomas: he doesn't have a lot of NFL qualities that teams are really looking for in a linebacker. He's not great physically or instinctively, but he's got great athleticism and therefore potential. He has a chance to make a team and could be a starter in a few years if everything does go right. He is, however, projected to be taken in the 6th round or later, perhaps going undrafted, and that wouldn't surprise me considering how many things he's missing for a prototypical NFL linebacker at this point. But that's Matthew Thomas from Florida State. Austin, give me your next prospect.
My next prospect is Duke Dawson. He's a cornerback from Florida. He is 5'11" and 197 pounds. Despite rooting for the Seminoles growing up, FSU couldn't match the push that Florida put in to get Dawson. Neither could Alabama, for that matter. Dawson came out of high school as the first-team All-State defender, and Florida got him on the field right away, having him play in 11 games and start 1 at safety, having 14 tackles and an interception. In 2015, he played every game as a reserve, having 10 tackles and forced fumbles, before starting 7 games as a nickel corner, racking up 24 tackles, 3.5 for a loss, 1 interception, and led Gators with 7 pass breakups. But after Jalen Ortiz, if you remember from last year, Tabar, and Quincy Wilson left for the NFL, Dawson got his chance to start in 2017 and didn't disappoint. He earned first-team All-SEC honors by playing in 11 games, getting 34 tackles, 2 going for a loss, leading his team in interceptions of 4, and having 9 pass breakups. After his fantastic first season as a starter, he declared for the draft. First, I'd like to start with his production. In the past 2 seasons, he's allowed less than a 40% completion rate in the past season. And then he absolutely destroyed Texas A&M's Christian Kirk, who's projected to be a early second-round pick or somewhere in the middle, maybe even late first round. But now as for his actual play, he plays with choppy, fast feet, which give him a good acceleration when transitioning around the field. Then something I personally like about him is that he's actually been helpful in run support, which you don't typically find in the average cornerback. And not only that, but he looks to smash running backs. Just watch the clip of him coming down in run support against Northern Texas. It was at 7:15 in the third quarter, and he was absolutely hit Northern Texas's running back. As for his coverage, he stops the receiver's release with patient mirrored footwork and has had a high connection rate when jamming from press. Also, he doesn't allow slants to happen against him, at all. It's probably the route he performs best against. Also, he absolutely eats route combination and feels breaks and shades early because he has high football intelligence and instincts. Then finally, he keeps his head on a swivel and keeps his eyes moving to look for route traffic, and he also knows how to ruin the catch point by attacking the high side. So, on the other side of things, word coming from most scouts is that they believe Dawson is just an average athlete that uses short strides, making his long speed just average as well. Since he doesn't have that speed, he gives up a bit of separation to straight line kind of guys. In coverage, he's got a few issues. The biggest, in my opinion, is that he gets grabby, and that's going to result in penalties in the NFL. The second is that he needs to crowd and keep a hand on his opponent. And the third is that he has issues smoothly staying mirrored with early route stems when playing off. And then the final two negatives about Dawson are that a lot of his missed tackles have come from him trying to lay a huge hit or overwrap as a tackler. So he's going to need to work on that. And also, he has short arms, making it hard to challenge the catch down the field. So that was Duke Dawson out of... Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I was just done. I was done with Duke Dawson. I had let's roll it back for a second. A lot of analysts have been saying that he doesn't have a lot of speed from his tape, and I don't really see it, to be honest with you. I guess you could say his slightly slower play speed, but it wasn't terrible. Still, though, I was very surprised reading about his speed being a problem when he ran a 4.46 40-yard dash time, which is the 11th best from this year's combine. And that just seems average to me. I don't know. To me, it's not a big problem, at least not as much as his missed tackles and something he can fix, his short arms. Still, though, he has football IQ and instincts to keep him around in the league for a while. Therefore, I think he'll be drafted in the third round, but could potentially fall to the fourth round. So now we're wrapping up Duke Dawson. That was him out of Florida. Who is your third prospect?
My third actually has a similar problem with the whole speed thing you were talking about. He ran a similar 40 time, but there are also concerns about his speed. And I'm talking about wide receiver Justin Watson from Pennsylvania, the Ivy League school. He was a star receiver there. 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons to finish his career with the Quakers, with 31 touchdowns in that span and 339 rushing yards as well. It should also be mentioned that Ivy League schools only play in 10 games each year, so take that into consideration with his stats. The pros for Watson, he's got NFL size for a wide receiver at 6'3", and he's got a well-proportioned frame. He has that first in, last out mentality when it comes to improving and getting better, so that's great to see. He does a great job of tracking the ball, and he has fantastic ball skills, snatching the ball with his hands away from his body before tucking it in. He shows good foot awareness near the sidelines and had a 4.5 40 time and a 40-inch vertical leap. So that's very impressive. But despite the good speed, moving to the cons now, he wasn't explosive and he didn't push hard enough in his routes. So teams are actually concerned about his explosiveness and his ability to be a vertical deep threat. He didn't show enough break off of tight man coverage, and he's definitely not a yards after catch kind of guy. He's basically a possession receiver only. And obviously, because he played at the Ivy League level, teams are really not sure if they're going to be getting a guy that is NFL ready at all. But bottom line with Watson, he was a big and productive receiver at Penn, and he had a fantastic pro day. But he doesn't have the explosiveness or agility that's needed right now. His route running could use some cleaning up too, and he's likely a day 3 selection that could turn into a red zone threat and perhaps more in the future with the right coaching. So that was Justin Watson from Penn. Who is your fourth and final prospect?
My fourth and final prospect is Jordan Mailata. He's an offensive tackle, and he's not coming out of college, but he's from South Sydney in Australia. But my letter is coming from down under, as I said, to transition from a rugby player to an NFL tackle. He was already established as a good rugby player at the age of 21, but in a conference, he said transitioning to the NFL is to challenge himself, and is honestly probably to make some really nice money, because I can't imagine being in a rugby league is going to pay as much as an NFL tackle, even if you are a practice squad member. But, however, he started from scratch this year. He is still learning the tackle position. It's going to be a pretty rough challenge for him, but one he is ready to take on. So there's not going to really be much football analysis going on here. It's mostly stuff to do with what we've seen from his rugby play and how it can transition to the NFL, so that's just a warning. So standing at 6'8" and weighing 346 pounds, this dude is tremendous, and that is basically what he's banking on for teams to want to draft him. Not only that, though, he has above-average arm length as well as hand size for a tackle. Then to put in, he has good musculation through his body, especially in his lower body. He is an athlete after all, so he's not just gifted physically. He's got some very good athletic traits. Something that will help him transition to football easier is that rugby is a sport that requires a lot of change of direction and lateral movement, so that will make it easier on him. From his rugby tape, he showed a strong, violent punch and stiff arm that could translate to the NFL very well as a pass punch. Finally, he impressed and surprised at his pro day, showing off a good ability to slide and mirror during pass protection drills. So, what's not so good about him is we got to address the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that he's never played a single down of American football in his life. This means he's going to need time to develop, learn technique, and overall better his game so he understands all the rules and really learns to harness all his power. The next issue is he was always an attacker in rugby. He's going to have to get used to playing in a defensive posture instead. And then finally, he's shown to have some hip tightness in his movements, and that's it. That's really all I can pull from it. I couldn't even really find his rugby tape. It was really hard. But teams see a lot of potential in Mailata, and for a good reason. It's not every day that there's a 6'8", 350-pound athlete for a team to work with. That's a big guy that already has an advantage with physical gifts. And honestly, there's something no one said, but I have thought about it ever since I read he was an offensive-style player on rugby. He could play fullback. Picture that. Another guy like the Fridge, who is going to stop him? He is used to cradling a ball, and on goal line stands, tell me one player in the NFL is going to stop that by themselves. Still, though, he's a project player that needs to develop at least for a little, but definitely an interesting choice nonetheless. So that was Jordan Mailata from South Sydney, not the college, just from that area. Who is your fourth prospect?
My fourth and final prospect is Derek Nady from Florida State, the 6'1", 299-pound senior. A defensive tackle, he really came onto the scene his last 2 years where he had 20.5 tackles for loss and 9.5 sacks. He was an all-conference selection twice in his last 2 years and a top 10 defensive tackle prospect coming out of high school despite being undersized. And another interesting tidbit, according to the NFL.com, his NFL comparison is Javon Hargrave. The pros about Nady is that he has a fantastic lower body strength and drive. A low center of gravity gives him good leverage, and he has great quickness off the line. He can play as a two-gap player or an attacking lineman, as seen by all of his tackles. He has a decent spin and swim move when rushing the passer and sheds blockers well. His negatives, though, he can get overwhelmed and moved by bigger linemen, and he's still undersized a bit for his position. He's not great at detecting when and where the play is going to go at a certain point, and his hands need a lot of work, especially when he's starting his pass rush. If he starts it slow, his pass rush is over. He's not going to make any impact on the play. So bottom line, Nady is an interesting player. He has good tape at a good level of competition, but he's likely a little too small to be a running down defensive tackle, and he didn't show enough as a pass rusher to be a specialist there either right now. So he has value, but time will tell how he's going to fit into an NFL scheme. He's a late third to early fourth round selection, most likely based on what I've seen. So that concludes what we've seen from just the random prospects we've looked at. So before we get into the other guys who the Steelers visited, let's rank the guys based on who you saw and just who you would most like to see in Pittsburgh. I'm trying to say.
This is like comparing apples to oranges. These guys are all different positions, but up first I have Jordan Mailata. He's probably going in the 7th round and is low-risk, high-reward guy. Plus, I think the Steelers are the best in the league at developing O-line. So if there's anyone that could turn this giant into a great, is Munchak. So I would very much love if either of the Steelers' 7th-round picks were used on Mailata. After Mailata was Russell Gage. He is the same as Mailata in the fact that he's a low-risk, high-reward. He can also possibly make the roster as a 7th-round pick. The Steelers could opt to go younger and cheaper, replacing Hayward Bay with Gage. So personally, I would love this pick as well, just not as much as I would love the Mailata one, because that one has even more upside. But next is Dorian O'Daniels. I actually love him too. I think if the Steelers wanted to double dip at inside linebacker in this stretch, he would be a good choice for his special teams potential as well as his versatility. He's basically a new Arthur Moat since he could play inside or outside. And we saw from last season that Arthur Moat could at least take a swing at it, and he was an inside linebacker in college. So, and then that leaves Duke Dawson last. And I actually liked him too. My only problem was he was too high of a pick for me to want the Steelers to pick him. If he somehow falls to the 5th round, I wouldn't mind the Steelers taking him, but I liked all my prospects. It's just it was really hard for me to actually make this entire list because they're all different and all of that. But how do you rank your prospects?
My favorite, Austin, was Justin Watson from Penn. He's projected to go between the 4th and 5th rounds, and I'm going to be honest with you, that's kind of where I want the Steelers to take a receiver. And if they're going to take one, would you rather be a smaller, speedy guy, or would you rather be a big guy like him? It doesn't matter. I'm just curious.
I think I would rather a big one. I think a big wide receiver is what the Steelers need, like another tall guy, big guy.
And I think Watson could be that guy. I'm hoping he's still on the board because I know the Steelers don't have a 4th-round selection right now. If he is somehow around in the 5th, I really hope the Steelers pick him because I think he would be a good option. He produced a lot at Penn, and he needs work on his technique, obviously, but I think he's a good luxury to have at that position. Second, I had Marcus Allen, the safety from Penn State. He's not my favorite prospect, but he's a good run defender. He's got a great work ethic, and he leads by example with toughness. He's not great in coverage, though, so he's not going to be in the lineup right away. He could be a long-term replacement at the strong safety position, so honestly, he kind of reminds me of what Morgan Burnett. He could become what Morgan Burnett is, basically, I think is what his upside could be. He's an earlier pick, though, so I wouldn't want him drafted super high, though. Derek Nady is my third here, although he's my second favorite. He's a bit undersized, but he looks like a good fit at defensive tackle here in Pittsburgh. I am concerned about his ability as a run stopper, though, because the Steelers have had problems with that in the past, and I'm not sure that he'd really help it. So that's something I'm a little concerned about. And the whole pass rushing thing, it's great when you get a pass rush up the middle with those guys, but again, the Steelers have Javon Hargrave. Adding him's not really that huge of a deal. Last but not least, I have Matthew Thomas, who I just wasn't really a fan of. And yes, he's super athletic, but he doesn't really do a whole lot that you'd want a linebacker to do very well. So I really question whether or not he'd be a good fit on any defense, and he's just not going to contribute right away. So I don't see a point in putting him on the team right now. So I don't think it would be worth adding him. All right, Austin. There were 10 different prospects that we did not get to, so let's just break this up in half. Why don't you do us a favor for our listeners and give the names of the 10 other guys the Steelers either met with at pro days, had private visits, or visited with at the Combine, and just kind of state really quickly where they're supposed to be selected and if you think it makes sense for the Steelers to get these guys, like if it's like a punter who's projected in round 6 or a kicker who's projected in round 6, you're going to say no because Chris Boswell, whatever. It's just something real quick.
Sure. First up is Tony Adams. He's a center from North Carolina State. The Steelers met with him at his pro day. And he's projected as a round 5 pick, around there. He's been, some other sites say 4, some other sites say 6, so average is 5. And I think that doesn't make sense. I don't think the center should be drafted at all. So especially that if it's not round 7, I think that's a no. Next up is Reggie Bonifan he's a running back from Louisville. He's projected to be an undrafted free agent after losing. He was a quarterback because I couldn't even find him. I struggled. He was a quarterback who lost the job to Lamar Jackson, obviously. And I feel like, why not? If he's an undrafted free agent, you could bring him in. If the Steelers don't end up drafting a running back, just bring one in, just have him test the camp. That's not a problem for me. It's a late-round pick. Not a late-round pick. He's not a pick at all. So there's that. After that is Jermaine Carter. He's an outside linebacker from Maryland. He's projected as an undrafted free agent as well on almost all sites. So I say why not? Again, if he's there, just let him come for camp and see how he does. After that is Curtis Cothran. He's a defensive tackle from Penn State. He's projected as an undrafted free agent. And again, it's going to be picking and choosing because obviously the Steelers can't get all of these guys after the draft. They have a 90-man roster that they have to uphold. And but I mean, these are guys that are just they're going to be there, so they're going to get some of these guys. And why not this guy? Add more defensive tackle depth for the camp. After that is Trey Flowers. He's a safety from Oklahoma State. He is projected in a very different set of rounds. On NFL Draft Scout, he was projected 4 to 5, and on Walter Football, he's 5 to 7. So I'm going to go into the idea that he's going to go in round 5 because that seems like it makes the most sense. And I think that would make sense for the Steelers. It's a safety, and honestly, actually, I take it back. I feel like the Steelers would have to take a safety a little bit earlier than that if they wanted to take a safety because I feel like once you get out of the third round, it's no longer important to take a safety for the Steelers because they could just wait till next year or something.
It's not a guarantee it's not a guarantee. I was just going to say it's not a guarantee after the third round that they're even going to make the roster.
Exactly. So it's not important to have one. After that is Joshua Frazier. He's a defensive tackle or a 3-4 defensive end, and he's out of Alabama. He's projected to be in the 7th round or undrafted. And honestly, I'm not a fan of Alabama guys. The Steelers aren't a fan of Alabama guys. So I'm going to say that just no automatically because there's another defensive tackle coming up, and that is Greg Gilmore. He's a defensive tackle or a 3-4 defensive end or a nose tackle from LSU, and he's projected to go in the 7th round. And why not? Just take the late-round pick on him. I don't see why not. After that is Devin Gray. He's a wide receiver from Cincinnati. He was projected as an undrafted free agent, and if the Steelers do not double-dip at wide receiver in the draft, I would like them to bring in a wide receiver, so why not one that they met with? And I think Devin Gray would be perfect. I think he is actually, out of any of these guys that are going undrafted, I want him to be brought in the most if the Steelers don't take a wide receiver early or double dip or anything like that. So after that, oh boy, let's see if I can get this. I actually read it, the pronunciation, as Joel Ayigbanue. I think I just butchered it, but he's an inside linebacker from Western Kentucky. He's projected to go in the 6th round, and honestly, we talked about inside linebacker being a position that the Steelers double dip in, and I wouldn't be mad. I read a little bit about him because I was trying to make sure I knew how to pronounce his name, and I still messed it up. And he wouldn't be that bad. And then after that is Richie James. He's a wide receiver from Middle Tennessee, and he's projected in the 6th round. And I actually liked him too. I read a little bit about him. If the Steelers double-dipped at wide receiver, I wouldn't be mad if he was the second one picked in the 6th round or so. Obviously, the Steelers don't have a 6th-round pick, but maybe he's there in the 7th round because some people have had him going later than 6, so maybe. But that's my first couple. You want to take the rest?
All right, the remaining 10, starting with cornerback Trey Johnson, a cornerback from Villanova. He's projected very late, so 6th round to an undrafted free agent. I don't think the Steelers really need to add a cornerback in this draft, but if they do, I'd prefer if it's in that kind of spectrum, late to undrafted free agent. So, I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on him late. Next is Christian Kirk, the receiver from Texas A&M. He's projected to go anywhere as early as the 1st round to as late as the 3rd. That's a little too early for me, but I did watch a little bit of his highlights, and I liked him, but I just don't think it's going to be realistic for the Steelers to grab him that early. Next is J.D. Moore, a fullback from LSU. He's a round 7 fringe guy, so probably an undrafted free agent considering he's a fullback. I like fullbacks. I'll be completely honest with you, but I don't see a need for one to be drafted. The Steelers, let's see. The last 3 Steelers fullbacks have all been undrafted, if I'm not mistaken. That being Roosevelt Nix, Will Johnson, and David Johnson, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
So, why draft one? So, if you can get him in Pittsburgh, the more fullbacks, the better. I love having fullbacks on the team. So, add him as a UDFA. That works just fine. Tarvarius Moore, free safety from Southern Mississippi. Rounds 2 to 3, he fits in perfectly as exactly what the Steelers need at the safety position. I don't know if he'll be drafted, but he looks like someone that the Steelers could really be taking. So he fits the bill for a need and projected round to be taken. So keep your eyes for Tarvarius Moore from Southern Mississippi, a free safety. Next, another fullback, Ryan Nall from Oregon State. UDFA, I just talked about fullbacks. Same thing applies for him as it did for J.D. Moore. R.J. Prince, the guard from North Carolina, we could not find anything for him. So the assumption is that he's assumed day 3 pick or UDFA, so again, late round selection. We've seen that work out with guys like B.J. Finney, Chris Hubbard, and they've become pretty solid offensive linemen thanks to Mike Munchak and the Steelers coaching staff, so why not? I'd bring him in. Next is a quarterback, Brogan Roback from Eastern Michigan. According to a USA Today outlet from out in that area, he's a late-round sleeper. Now, I don't think the Steelers need to draft a quarterback. Austin, I know you agree with me on that. There's no point in drafting a guy to be a camp body. And I know it's interesting because he led Eastern Michigan to their most wins in a 2-year stretch they've had, I think, since the 90s. But that's just not enough for me to want to have him. The Steelers have their quarterback depth chart set, so you can bring him in as a camp body, but I don't see him being drafted. Next is M.J. Stewart, a cornerback from North Carolina. Again, I don't think the Steelers are drafting one, especially considering he's a projected second-day pick. I don't think it makes sense to bring him in. Macklin Weaver, a defensive end from Eastern Illinois. According to Behind the Steel Curtain, he's a likely UDFA. You can bring in defensive linemen if you want for camp bodies. I don't really think they're that much of a priority. The Steelers have their guys in place. If you're lucky, he can unseat Daniel McCullers, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. He played 6 defensive snaps last year. Not a big deal. Finally is outside linebacker Chris Worley, who was a 7th-round / undrafted kind of projection. He can play on the inside or outside, so if he's another Keon Adams type selection, I'll take it. I'll be happy with that. See how it works out. So those are the 20 prospects outside of the others that we looked at. So now you'll have a full overview of all the prospects the Steelers visited with. So, try to remember those names, if you will. We'll post those names as well for you guys. All right, there's a little NFL news to get to, so let's talk about it. The Nick Foles just revised their deal for an option in 2019, a restructuring here. What do you think about that? It seems like a good move for both sides.
Yeah, I think it gives Nick Foles the option if he wants to go to another team and start, so he's not stuck being a backup for Carson Wentz if he works out. And also, if Carson Wentz God forbid, gets hurt again, he can fill in and start again. So I like it for both sides as well. I think he deserved a little bit of a pay raise after his Super Bowl win for the Eagles. So good move.
Yep, absolutely. I'm in complete agreement. Next, the Jets picked up Leonard Williams' 5th-year option. Is that really surprising?
No, not really. Leonard Williams has been pretty great for them.
Yep, absolutely. Did you see the Giants acquired a punter, Riley Dixon, from the Broncos after they signed Marquette King?
Oh, yeah, it did. It's a conditional 7th-round pick, right?
Yes, I believe so. 2019, though, not this year.
You're right.
But long live Brad Wing. That's all I have to say. And then, I don't know if you saw this, but the Giants are reportedly not interested in Des Bryant, so that saga continues. We don't know where he's going to be yet.
I've been hearing the rumors of the Saints. I've been hearing a lot of Saints talk lately for Des Bryant. As time goes on, more Saints.
All right. I have a feeling he's not going to get signed until after the draft at this point, though. We're too close.
I agree with that. I think him and C.J. Anderson are going to be free agents till at least after the draft.
So, okay. That should wrap things up for today. Just a quick bit of news for you guys. We will not be doing any type of schedule analysis, like a deep one. We had thought about doing it already, but we just figured there's no point until at least the NFL draft is over. So we just figured there's not not really a point considering the teams will be different. They're usually completely inaccurate anyway, but especially considering that we don't know, who is going to be on what team, because crazy trades happen too. So let's not do it so quickly. We'll let it digest for a little, and then we'll talk about it. Because, like, case in point, everyone's talking about the Steelers' brutal second half of the schedule, and granted, it does look tough, but you have to remember, the Steelers faced a lot of backup quarterbacks in the second half of last season. That could easily happen again. So don't take it as though they're going to be at full strength, because they won't be. So just remember that. All right. So that concludes our pre-draft coverage. I know we officially ended our position outlooks last time, but we've looked at all the prospects. Anything else? Anyone that gets drafted that we have not mentioned their names on this podcast will shock us. I believe I'm comfortable in saying that, correct?
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I agree with that too.
So we wanted to cover our bases this year, and I really hope that we have, because if not, then we got to go back to the drawing board next year. But I think we've done a pretty good job this time around. But the draft, it's now 10:40 on a Saturday night because everyone else is doing something exciting on their Saturday night. But we're just having a wonderful time. I definitely am. So it's a good time to be around. The NFL draft just around the corner, just 5 days away, and very thankful. I've been really pumped up because my hockey team pissed me off last night, the Pittsburgh Penguins, but that's another story. But the draft is a great time. So in any case, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about the show, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Find the show on Twitter or Instagram at stronger_steel, and for Instagram, it's the same thing, just _ NFL at the end of that. Facebook, Stronger Than Steel Podcast. You can also find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes under that same name. And check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.com, .blog, strongerthansteelblog, my goodness, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. There we go. We're going to be posting a list of all the prospects we looked at, and we'll be doing our mock draft soon, Austin. Do you have any idea when you're going to be doing yours? Because we're going to be releasing ours separately. We're going to be doing a Steelers full 7-round mock draft and an entire first round. So any ideas when you're going to do yours and release yours?
Mine should come out Monday morning, which is 4:23. So it should be around then. It might be Monday night, depending on if I could get it all edited together and stuff by then, because I'm going to be trying to get all the pictures of the prospects. So it's going to take a little bit.
Alrighty, will do. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll probably have mine out. If I'm lucky, I'll have it out tomorrow night. Might have to wait till Monday or Tuesday for that, though. But we will have them out soon, so don't worry about that. So, Austin, thank you again for joining me. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast.
Have a good night.